I got good news. It's Thursday. That may not mean much to you, but this should mean something to all of us. This is the 100th Devo that we have filmed since the pandemic began. So we didn't know if we should celebrate it or not because, we're still in a pandemic, so that's nothing to celebrate. So we thought we'd make it special with our 100th Devo by talking about when does the Bible mention 100 of something. So we looked through and we realized that there is a big 100 milestone in the Bible, and it's in Genesis chapter 21, verse 5, and it talks about Abraham becoming a dad at 100 years old. So this is our 100th Devo, and we're going to be talking about the 100-year-old dad named Abraham. So in Genesis chapter 21, it describes something, and to give you a little background, God promised Abraham that through Abraham, an entire nation would be established. He tells Abraham that this nation will be more numerous than the stars. He tells Abraham that through this nation, that Abraham's going to begin as the father of, that through this nation, all the earth will be blessed. You can read about that. It's a promise. It's a covenant that God made with Abraham. It's found in Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 3. But there's a problem. When God gave this promise, made this covenant with Abraham, that through Abraham, this great nation, this huge nation would develop. Abraham's an old man who's got an old wife. They've got no kids. And it's such a shocking promise that Sarah, Abraham's wife, actually laughs when she hears that God has promised that she's going to be pregnant. She's in her 90s. And she's thinking, my goodness, you've heard of 16 and pregnant. What about 99 and pregnant? Like that's a whole new show in and of itself, right? Because that doesn't happen. And what we read in Genesis chapter 21 is that, of course, God came through on his promise. Genesis 21, it says, the Lord visited Sarah and he said, as he had said, and the Lord did to Sarah as he promised. God comes through on his promise. And Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age at the time of which God had spoken to him. Abraham called the name of his son who was born to him, whom Sarah bore him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, as God commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Wow. So once you get over just the thought, the visuals, the craziness of a 100-year-old man and a 90-some-year-old woman holding a newborn baby, think about this. Think about how God's promises never fail. We can turn, and you may want to do this now or after this Devo's over, to Hebrews chapter 11. In Hebrews chapter 11, it looks back on this incident, which at this point was over 1,000 years ago. And looking back on this incident, it says this in Hebrews 11, verse 11. It says, by faith Sarah herself received power to conceive even when she was past the age, since she considered him faithful who had promised. So Abraham and Sarah, there was nothing special about them. There was nothing physically special. They didn't go to CrossFit every day and stay in great shape so they could make babies at an old age. What was so important and so significant and unique about them is that even though they were in a place where they shouldn't be able to have kids, they had faith. We read in verse 11 that Sarah had faith. We learn earlier in chapter 11 that Abraham had faith. And we learned that through Abraham's faith and Sarah's faith in God, it wasn't that they spoke something into existence. It wasn't that they just decided one day, hey, I'm going to declare that by faith I'm going to have a kid. It was they had faith in the words that God had already declared to them. They held on to it until it became a reality. It wasn't anything necessarily important about the size of their faith. It was what their faith was attached to. We remember this too in this 100th episode, this 100th Devo that we're doing here. Abraham took him 100 years to have a kid. We're 100 days or Devos worth into this pandemic, and we're still waiting for God to bring us through. We're still maybe waiting to see that the good that God is working through this, just as Abraham and Sarah had a promise they were holding on to. You and I have many promises from God that we're holding on to. We read in 1 Peter 1:4 that God has given us very great and precious promises. Some of those promises that God works evil for good, that God works all things together for good to those who love him, to those who are called according to his purpose. Those promises are things that we're holding on to right now. Even though we're 100 days in, we haven't been able to see the result of those promises and that we're holding on to like Abraham and Sarah had yet, but we know one day we will. So the encouragement here is just like Abraham and Sarah, even though they weren't perfect, even though there were times where it was really hard for them to hold on by faith to those promises, the encouragement for us on this 100th Devo is for us to hold on to those promises that God has made to us as believers in Jesus Christ. There's no pandemic, there's no different school schedule that can stop God from doing what he is planning to do in my heart and in your heart and in the hearts of everyone who believes in him. So I want you to take courage. I want you to stay strong in your faith on this 100th Devo, and I want you to have a great day.